And you're live.
Thank you. Welcome everybody to Lagoon City Parks and Waterways Commission agenda for Thursday, December 12th, 2024. We'll start the opening of the meeting by the recorded announcement from Amber.
Today's meeting is being streamed live on the Township of Ramara YouTube channel. Be advised that by attending a public meeting of the Commission, you are consenting to your image, voice, and comments being recorded and will form a part of the public record. The Chair, CAO, or Secretary have the discretion and authority at any time to direct the termination or interruption of live streaming in exceptional circumstances where the content of the debate is considered inappropriate to be published. Attendees are advised that they may be subject to legal action if their actions result in unacceptable behavior or comments.
Thank you. We'll start off the adoption of agenda and our Commission agenda dated December 12th, 2024 be adopted as presented. Put it on the floor. Councillor Bell, second by Commissioner Shoesmith. Any discussion? No. All in favor? Thank you. The next one is the adoptions of the minutes. 3.1 minutes of the meeting held on December 14th, 2024. Recommendations that Lagoon City Parks and Waterways Commission minutes dated November 14, 2024 be adopted as presented. So we put on the floor Commissioner Mason, second by Commissioner Shoesmith. No. Let's all fast. So the special Lagoon City Parks and Waterways meeting held on November 21st, 2024. Recommendations that the minutes of the special Lagoon City Parks and Waterways meeting held on November 21st, 2024 be adopted presented. Put on the floor. Commissioner Shoesmith, second by Councillor Bell. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Perfect. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. We have any of that? No. Open forum regarding agenda items only. I didn't see anybody that was coming to speak. Okay. Presentation receiving petitions and deputations. We'll put it on the floor. Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority, the recommendation that waterside wisdom presentation from the LSRCA with respect to Lake Simcoe health and update be received for information. Somebody put it on the floor for me. Commissioner Mason, second by Councillor Bell. And I believe we have Don Goodyear here to speak to us.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, Don. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
Good, good. I'm not sure if you've met everybody, or I guess you see all our names there.
I do, yeah. And I've attended a meeting previously, so I think I can recognize everyone. Good morning.
Okay. And during your presentation, do you want us to ask questions while you're doing it, or wait for a time when you say ask questions?
I'm at your pleasure. Whatever is the norm for the committee, Mr. Chair. I'm happy either way.
We do it whatever way you like. If you want to not be interrupted, and then you can pick a time to say, okay, because we'll just keep track of our questions. It's not a problem either way.
Well, there kind of are two presentations in one here. So why don't we take them along the way, just so that you don't lose the thought when we change subjects.
Okay. Well, away you go.
Okay. I'll share my screen here. Is that working?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for the opportunity this morning. I just wanted to provide an update on the health of Lake Simcoe. And my slide's not advancing. What's going on? There we go. So Lake Simcoe, just some introductory remarks here. Largest inland lake in South Central Ontario, one of the most recreationally fished lakes in Southern Ontario. with environmental conditions and stressors that are similar to the lower Great Lakes. Relatively smaller in size, which means that what we learn here can be applied to the larger Great Lakes and other regional lakes. Just a reminder about the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan and that 44-ton target of phosphorus load per year and where that came from. The ultimate management goal is a sustainable cold water fishery, lake trout and whitefish, Cisco being species of interest in Lake Simcoe. And the target is an end of summer dissolved oxygen concentration of 7 milligrams per liter. So if you back calculate based on the relationship between phosphorus load, phosphorus concentration, and dissolved oxygen, that is where the 44 tons per year came from, is trying to hit that 7 milligram per liter dissolved oxygen concentration target for late summer. But that well understood relationship between phosphorus load, phosphorus concentration, and dissolved oxygen is changing. We first noticed, I'm just going to click through to get everything on the screen here. We first noticed the shift back in 2019 when we were doing the phosphorus load calculations. And as I mentioned, that previously well understood relationship between phosphorus load and ultimately dissolved oxygen, which is the target for our self-sustainable cold water fishery, is evolving. So we studied this for about 4 years, reviewed the literature where this is happening elsewhere, done some monitoring, and have basically established 3 kind of hypotheses that seem to be either individually or jointly causing the shift in lake ecology. The first being a change in climate, basically how precipitation is supplied to the watershed. So seasonality and timing is shifting. You may have noticed that you get kind of more intense rainfall these days. A little fewer and farther between, but when they come, they're doozies. Milder winters with rain events in the winter, so we don't have that accumulating snowpack and then the big spring melt. So changes in delivery of water to the lake is a factor, we believe. The second hypothesis is related to invasive species, essentially the mussels, and how those mussels are controlling the distribution of phosphorus within the lake. And then the last one is around how the phosphorus is being uptaken and by what. So plants and algae in the lake, and again, invasives. So I'll dive in a little more detail into each of those to try and give you a better sense. So for phosphorus supply, it's really the amount of flow that drives it's the most important factor, and not the total volume. So in the blue bars here are the total amount of precipitation, and the green bars are the tributary flows. And you can see, I'm just going to again click through this and some animations I don't really need. You can see that the higher flows are what leads to the higher loads. So 2017, the highest green bar results in the highest load on the right hand side there, 131 tons. 2016 is kind of a typical Canadian seasonal precipitation pattern, where we had colder temperatures, we had a snowpack accumulation and a big spring melt. The highest precipitation over those 3 years on the screen, but the lowest load. So that just gives you a sense of the driver flow is, and how a changing precipitation delivery is affecting it. Interestingly, in 2017, summer downbursts and winter rain caused higher flows. And there was one event in June of 2017 that delivered 12 tons of phosphorus, and one event in February, rain on snow event, that delivered 20 tons of phosphorus. So those really unique precipitation patterns are really driving the phosphorus picture for us these days, which is different than in the past. So the phosphorus delivery is changing due to climate, and within the lake, phosphorus cycling has been altered by invasive mussels. So those mussels are really efficient at removing algae and particles. So increased water clarity, and we're seeing a redistribution of nutrients to the benthic layer at the lake bottom in both the nearshore and offshore areas. So just a little more background there. So we're seeing a shift from zebra mussels to coaga mussels. Zebra mussels shown in blue on these maps. Darker blue is a higher concentration, higher biomass, and they're restricted into the kind of warmer and hard substrate areas, kind of shallower than 20 meters. And you can see over time from left to right how the concentration has really declined. Kind of the live fast and die young kind of population, rapid increase and then crashing as they run out of space and food, and in our case in Lake Simcoe, being outcompeted by coaga mussels. So in the most recent survey last summer, there were a few zebra mussels found, but we think of them as functionally extinct. They're not doing much to affect the ecology of the lake these days. They've been all but replaced by coaga mussels. And coagas are much more resilient species. They can survive on mud and silt, and they're active all year round, including under the ice in really cold temperatures. So for the first time in 2023, there were more mussels in the deep water than in the shallow water, more than doubled since 2015. And they're different. They're larger and longer lived. So the coagas have really taken over. They're covering, as you can see on the right hand image there, just about the entire lake bottom, and they're thriving. We don't know how long that'll be the case, but definitely having an impact on the lake, as you'll see in this next slide. Just a quick point. The note there: the 2023 biomass is more than double what we saw in 2015. So huge growth. And what that leads to is phosphorus filtering. So what these maps are showing is how fast the water column gets filtered by the mussels. Darker colors means a faster filtering. And the biggest change that we see is in filtering rate of deep water. So that has more than doubled. Crazy numbers, 9.2 billion liters per hour in 2015 has more than doubled to 21 billion liters per hour, which gets water that gets filtered by these mussels in the lake. That results in increased water clarity and more significantly, an increased delivery of dissolved phosphorus to the lake bottom, particularly in the offshore. And these mussels are also incorporating nutrient into their biomass. So, 20.9. That's the billion liters. Sorry, there's another. There we go. So this bar graph here on the right hand side, there's more than 24 metric tons of phosphorus bound in these coaga mussels. So another question is, what would happen to that phosphorus if the coaga mussel crash like the zebra mussel population has? So some interesting trends and significant impacts to the ecology in the lake. And then the final hypothesis around why this change in relationship between phosphorus load and dissolved oxygen is around what's happening to the phosphorus once it gets into the lake. Mentioned a couple of times increased water clarity. We've got less algae and suspended solids because of the filtering of the mussels. And the water samples in the offshore, we're seeing 75 to 80% of the phosphorus is in dissolved form. So that's readily available, and what we're seeing is that readily available dissolved phosphorus is being taken up by starry stonewort and other plants and algae. They're very abundant, as I know the Commission is aware, and our seasonal studies are indicating that phosphorus sequestration by starry stonewort is very large over the growing season. So what we want to try and understand now is how this compares to native plants, and whether the algae are more resistant to decomposition, and what's happening over winter. So some questions remain, but we're definitely seeing changes in what happens to phosphorus in the lake. So in summary, some very complex changes have occurred since around 2009, likely driven by climate and invasive species. But so have other lakes, such as the lower Great Lakes. And Lake Simcoe is an example of these trends. What we're seeing and what we've studied in detail is happening elsewhere. And what we want to do now is reevaluate the process of phosphorus cycling in the lake, the role of the mussels and algae, and what it might mean for lake management. So currently in the process of developing a model to try and understand the fate of phosphorus and other nutrients in the lake, given these changes and the physical and chemical processes that are happening in the lake. And again, all of that to drive our management approach for the watershed. Would never envision a departure from phosphorus reduction efforts, but what else do we need to do is the focus given these changes. That is kind of the end of the, sorry, see Councilor Bell has got it
there. So you're done now, so you're ready for questions?
Well, I just saw Councilor Bell had a hand.
I don't. Yeah, I can't see the councilors. I don't want to see them. Okay, so I can't see you guys. So if you want to just let me know. So Councilor Bell?
I do have a question. Thank you. Thank you, Don. A little while back, there was some discussion about the 44-ton metric, and I know that adaptive approach is looking at whether that target is reasonable. And during that conversation, you had actually talked about the potential that in a strange way, it's possible that phosphorus would need to be reintroduced in some of the Great Lakes. And so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that to give people an understanding of just how this balance can really change our reality.
Thank you, Councilor Bell. Yeah, the 44-ton target is related to that 7 milligram per liter dissolved oxygen target for a healthy Great Lakes, or pardon me, a healthy cold water fishery, and it's based on the relationship between 44 ton phosphorus load equals 7 milligrams per liter dissolved oxygen. What we're seeing now is we're achieving that or near that 7 milligram per liter dissolved oxygen with higher phosphorus loads. And to your point about introduction of nutrients, I'm not sure we get there, but there is a challenge in the food web. In the deep water conditions, there are food web challenges. So the mussels are filtering the phosphorus to a point where the species that are at the bottom of the lake are a little bit starved for food. Yeah, whether that means introduction of phosphorus. I mean, that is a strategy that's been used out in British Columbia in some nutrient-starved lakes. We're certainly not there at this point, but trying to understand the change that has happened and whether there are additional management strategies that we need to employ aside from phosphorus reduction.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schussman.
Yeah, hi. I'm just wondering, how did we sort of give up one mussel, the zebra mussel, in favor of the quagga mussel? Is the quagga a more aggressive species? And wouldn't their population sort of tend to decline sort of in a natural way if they're consuming all this phosphorus?
Thank you. Yeah, great question. The zebra mussels tend to behave. We've seen that behavior in other lakes where they expand very rapidly and then crash. They kind of consume all of the resources and then die out. Quaggas, to your point, are much more resilient. They are longer living in other ecosystems, so much more adaptable to different substrates. They're able to lie dormant for periods when nutrients aren't available. So that's the $1 million question: is if and when that population will crash. It would have significant impacts to the lake. There's that 24 metric tons of phosphorus bound in their shells and soft tissues that presumably would be released. So there'd be some significant impacts to the lake if that population crashed. We're not seeing indications of that at the moment,
Are they prone to crash if they're that resilient, or
yeah, that's right. We've not seen that crash elsewhere. They're more persistent.
So we're moving in a very negative direction then, basically. But yeah, based on your graph, the growth just seemed to be we're getting inundated.
Right. Yeah. The certainly from an ecology change, it's very stark. In terms of nutrient dynamics, there's been some benefit to the lake in terms of water clarity and in terms of nutrient uptake. So it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. The quaggas have actually helped with water clarity, and they have the nutrient uptake is a small benefit.
So if you introduce more phosphorus into the lake, wouldn't you be feeding them then and encouraging their population to grow?
They have enough phosphorus, certainly, and we're not suggesting introducing more. We have a phosphorus reduction strategy that we're working very hard on, and it's the other strategies. So are there mechanisms to look at the algae, the invasive plants, and the relationship in the food web at the lake bottom that we can start to tackle now, in addition to phosphorus reduction? That's been our blinders on sole focus for decades. What else do we need to do is the question.
That would have been my next question.
Yeah. Invasive species management is a challenge, certainly, but understanding the system is the first step to figuring out how to nudge it in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
It looks to me like, too, if they do crash, it happens fast, and that would be a lot of phosphorus in our lake in no time at all, right?
If they followed a similar pattern to the zebras, yes, it would be a quick introduction of a large phosphorus source.
So then you touched on the starry stonewort, and that's the one that we're battling here all the time. And from what I understand, that is an algae that actually gets its nourishment from the water, and that's why you've included that, I guess, with all of this. So how much of that, how much phosphorus are they taking out of the water? That type of weed in Lake Simcoe.
I don't have the number at my fingertips, but they are uptaking a significant amount over the growing season through the summer. It's very prevalent across the lake. You're certainly not alone in having to deal with that invasive. You're right; it's a macroalgae. But it is a significant consumer of phosphorus, dissolved phosphorus.
Because I know when we're harvesting it, we're pulling out a lot of it, and it is filled, I think, with phosphorus when we pull it all out, because it seems to just dry up and turn into that white dust almost immediately. You'd think that maybe we could all work together and figure out a way of putting it onto the fields and actually not selling it, but making a lot, maybe helping out for the costs that we have pulling it out of our lagoons all the time, because we have tons and tons and tons of it.
That's an interesting concept, yeah.
And the other thing, I guess, the same concept would be: what about these? I guess these mussels that are out there. Would we not be able to pull them out of the lake and put them on our fields too to use for phosphorus? Because that's what the fields. I'm assuming that's what farmers need for their growth, right? Of all their crops is the phosphorus.
It's definitely part of the nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium is what they put in fertilizers. The challenge with removal of mussels is they are it's just so labor intensive. There isn't a good mechanism that I'm aware of to mechanically remove them. They cover almost the entire bottom, and it's a very deep lake. So just logistically, a very difficult thing to do. There have been discussions around mechanical removal, and the logistics just couldn't be overcome.
Right, and I'll go back to the weeds. They're the ones probably that we spend our most money on, is finding a way to get dispose of them. And the different laws, I guess, stop us from pulling it out, letting them dry out even, and that we could send out more mass, like by allowing the water to drain out. Is that something we could work with you with over dealing with things like that, or is that a different ministry or a different department?
So in terms of the permits for harvesting and treatment, right? We don't have a role there. I think we trying to provide advice, and we certainly work with MNRF and MECP on the health of the lake, but we don't have a role in the permission side of things.
Yeah, because taking to another step with the climate change, I've always wondered with us harvesting whether or not we could harvest earlier, because the climate is changing and it is different. And I would have to think that the fish are spawning at different times now, and maybe we need to work with how this is all happening, that we can work together instead of being the second or third week in July before you can harvest. Are the fish not spawning earlier?
Right. Yeah. The MNR is the agency that's researching the fish community in the lake, so they'd be best suited to advise on any changes in spawning and whether that would translate to any changing in terms of those windows, harvesting windows. But there is a change in the fish community in the deep water environment. How that translates to the near shore, I'm not sure. But MNR would be the agency there.
And I have one last question too. We talk about the phosphorus that these mussels are taking out. They're also taking out, as you say, nutrients out of the water that the fish eat or other algae eat that we need. Is that what they're doing too?
The algae, yeah, that other organisms rely on, which is having a a bit of a domino effect on the food web that we're trying to understand.
Okay. Thank you. That was very interesting. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Okay, and you said there was a second part now?
Yeah, there's. I just have a couple of slides on the recent blue-green algae bloom that we experienced in Lake Simcoe. So I understand there was some interest expressed by the commission. So grabbed a few slides from a colleague at the office on this topic. Blue-green algae or cyanobacteria are very old organisms. The first photosynthetic organisms on the planet, billions of years old. They're very hardy, can survive tough environmental conditions, and form blooms, as we've found for the for a significant time this summer. Although those are becoming more common in the province, even in environments where we didn't experience them before, low nutrient lakes and cold lakes, likely as a function of, as you see in the slide there, wet spring, hot summer, and then strong winds to mix the water column. Three types of cyanobacteria. Affectionately known as Andy, Fanny, and Mike. These are what they look like under a microscope. And our limnologist, Brian Ginn, is able to identify these bacteria through from water samples that we take. Just a note that they are a little bit tricky to identify. They're not always that bright blue-green. The brightest color actually shows up when the bloom is about to end. Often it just looks like turbid water or pollen on the lake. But in the morning and evening, they are more evident. And they can actually sink. So in midday, they actually sink and can go to quite a depth, 11 meters there. Not all blue-green algae form blooms, and not all blooms are toxic. But when they are toxic, the toxins affect the liver, the nerves, and some skin irritation with young children and pets being especially vulnerable. And that point about aerosols, you can actually, a jet boat or those sea-doos, as they churn up the water, and you can actually put those aerosols or put those bacteria into the air. So be careful of that too. Within Lake Simcoe, there were some reports of blooms in the 1970s. Not sure how accurate that is, but there are some reports in historically. Since 2008, when we've been keeping an eye on this, we've seen localized small surface gums along some shorelines, and certainly blooms in inland lakes, Musselman's Lake and Wagner Lake. You're familiar with the bloom in 2013 at Lagoon City. And we've been monitoring and have a surveillance program since about 2016, and we work with the province and health units and municipal water operators to try and provide early line of sight to the blue-green algae. This summer, as I mentioned, the real first kind of lake-wide experience, and something that's of significant concern, of course. So won't go into all the details here, but we had two bouts this past summer, 2024. One in July, where we found the Annie and Mike, the Anabina and microcystis cyanobacteria within the lake. And it was present across most of the lake. It shifted with winds and currents, and beaches were closed for a good chunk of the middle and end of July, as I'm sure you're aware. And then we had a second bout later in the summer, in September. That wasn't as extensive, but did affect a good chunk of the lake in the Cooks Bay in the main basin. And again, we worked with the Spills Action Center to make folks aware of this, and there were some. Thankfully, this wasn't a real hot time of the year, but there were beach closures as a precaution. And then this last slide here is our latest invasive species. In 2024, water soldier was identified in the southern portion of Cooks Bay, and MNR is leading a group of agencies to develop an action plan this winter, and they'll be implementing that starting in 2025. So water soldier is looks like the top of a pineapple, and it roots in shallow water, and we see that in Cooks Bay and along much of the shoreline up towards Innisfil. So it's an aggressive species as well. Unfortunately, in Lake Simcoe. So just another plug for adaptive lake management, understanding what's going on and to inform what we need to do about it. And I'll maybe stop there.
We'll start with Commissioner Mason, and then I see you, Commissioner Schussman.
Where does the water soldier come from? Is it where's it origin?
So it's I'm not sure when it was banned, but it was sold in like aquarium stores. It was an aesthetic plant that people used in aquariums until we saw it in the environment and realized how aggressive it was, and it is now a banned. The sale of it is banned, but that's I think where it originated.
Yeah, that's what I had guessed it was going to be, was from aquariums. And is it from Asia or?
I believe it is originally an Asian species.
Commissioner Schussman?
Yeah, I'm just curious what the water sampling schedule is. Is it weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, after rainfall? There's been a sign on the beach here almost consistently for the past several years, warning against entering into the lake. So I'm just wondering, that sign never seems to be removed. Have we been in this like steady state of sort of warning and sort of crisis, for lack of a better word?
Well, for the sampling question, we're on the lake every couple of weeks through a kind of a normal schedule, and then as needed for other for kind of special events, if you will, like this one. So we were on the lake for the blue-green algae very regularly for most of July and into August. We are looking to increase our presence on the lake. It's a labor-intensive thing, as you can imagine. Mm-hmm. But and to your point about the signs on the beaches, some it is a health unit kind of area of expertise, but some beaches are more susceptible to the bacteria and runoff, So there's that perpetual warning. Other beaches are more fortunate in terms of their location, and the conditions are not conducive to the algal blooms. So those are sampled by MECP at the request of the health unit, and depending on the result of that test, that's what guides the postings and closures.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Bell? Oh, we'll do Councilor Bell, then we'll do Josh.
Sorry, thank you. Don, thank you again for your presentation. I think it's so important, the education piece, and I want to just kind of circle around a few different things. So again, I appreciate the preparation of the proposed characterization study, and you may know there was no appetite at Township of Ramara Council to move forward. But I guess my question is, I know now that the Ramara Creek's subwatershed plan, along with other subwatershed plans, are being updated. And I know that the website looks to be pretty much complete at this point. I saw now that some of the pieces that you were still working on seem to be live. So it looks as if you've got all the information there. So I guess what I'm sort of looking at right now is we've got this 2015 subwatershed plan for Ramara. We've also got a 2015 comprehensive stormwater management plan. As Commissioner Shoesmith just pointed out, we have a lot of nutrient loading in this area. And the other sort of moving piece is that I did make contact with the Barrie Water Testing Center in the spring when the condition of our waterways was something I had never seen in the last almost decade. And I know we had significant rainfall, but we've also had significant rainfall in other years and seasons. And this year, the water was, there was a terrible odor. It was the deepest, darkest brown I've seen it visually, but that there was a terrible and foul smell as well. And I don't know if the Barrie Water Testing Center, through Minister of Environment, did make their way here to test the water. But I guess where I'm at right now is we know that we don't know because we haven't done an updated study, but we can intuit that we have nutrient loading here. And I guess there's two pieces. So there's the management of the waterways themselves, which of course are now a tributary to Lake Simcoe. And we also have water taking here. So I guess I'm wondering, where are we in the big picture? Like LSRCA needs to be working with MNRF. We understand that. We know that through the subwatershed plan, OMAFRA was also, and I guess I should say, for the people listening, Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, Minister of Natural Environment, Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. I'm using all the acronyms, but we know, and even county Simcoe County was involved at that point. So we have all these bodies lined up, and where do we go next? Like, where are we with these collaborative partnerships that are going to drive the change that we need to see?
Thank you, Councillor Bell. I think you pointed out a couple of important aspects of I think a potential answer. The existing watershed plan for the Ramara Creeks has some recommendations in it that I think are still relevant. You're quite right that there are updates planned for some watersheds around the lake. What we find often is that degrees change, but the stressors remain. So the opportunities, for example, for addressing uncontrolled stormwater runoff, or best practices for nutrient reduction or application that are in that original plan would still be valuable. So I would encourage the implementing bodies that are identified. So that's the town, that's ourselves, the Conservation Authority, and the province, to take another look at those. try and identify kind of opportunities for improvement that fit with capital plans and operating plans. We are always looking for stormwater retrofit opportunities. I'll make a plug for my colleague in the restoration team. We have an offsetting program, so there are even some financial resources we can bring to supplement stormwater retrofits. If we can demonstrate phosphorus removal, then there's funding available from the Conservation Authority to subsidize those kinds of projects. And similarly, if there are projects that get water in the ground, to maintain groundwater recharge, we can often subsidize those as well through that same offsetting program. So a couple of plugs there, but I think looking at the watershed plan and trying to tackle some of those recommendations would be I wouldn't say low-hanging fruit, but we don't have to wait for those.
Yeah, so I guess that's sort of too what I'm thinking is that implementation plan back in 2015 included 85 immediate recommendations is actually the terminology. So clearly a decade later, we haven't exactly, met immediate, I wouldn't say. So I guess that's what I'm trying to understand is, how do we start to move this forward? So we didn't have an appetite for the characterization study, meaning we may or may not have the most updated information. So I feel as if it's maybe the next step would actually include you bringing, or the LSRCA, maybe an MNRF together, coming to the Township of Ramara to talk a little bit more about what these sub-watershed plans are and mean. And I'm wondering, as a result, or sorry, as a next step with the updating of the plans, is that happening? Is LSRCA making an active move to come back to communities and say, hey guys, we built these plans 10 or 12 or 8 years ago, and it's time to start moving them forward, so that from the lake management side, you would be able to sort of help municipalities know, what do we do first? Because 85 recommendations could feel clearly somewhat overwhelming a decade later. So are you kind of looking at this from a how do we get the process restarted? What do we do first perspective?
I think that's a great suggestion. Prioritizing those existing recommendations against available resources and kind of who's doing what would be a great first step, and we'd be happy to be part of that conversation. Yeah.
Josh, you had a question?
No, sorry. It was more just clarification for Commissioner Shoesmith. The beach sampling and beach postings, it's recommended by the Simcoe District Health Unit, Simcoe Muskoka. The sampling is completed every Tuesday. We're notified by Thursdays, and the post and signs go up Thursdays. So about 5 years ago, they only sample public beaches. So the two beaches, Lagoon City, the north and the south, because they are private, they are not sampled. 5 years ago, we made the determination that if the public beach was posted, we would just carry that posting through to the north and south beach, just for consistency. Because back 5 years ago, we only posted our private beach, or our public beach, sorry, and we had concerns raised from the other two beaches. So I just wanted to clarify that. Typically it's done June, July, August, and September that program ceases. And that's why those postings are only during those times.
So when you say South Beach, or the public beach, you're referring to the beach that's just slightly south of the South Beach.
Correct. Yeah. Beach. Okay. Yeah, the public beach in Lagoon City. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Thanks.
I have a few questions. Going back to the blue-green algae. When you talked about all the different things that it could affect on human beings, what does it do to the actual fish and everything that is in the water dealing with it?
To my knowledge, the fish are okay. It's terrestrial species that are not used to it and are affected.
from it. Have you found ways of preventing it or fixing the issue? You know, because I know I'd never heard of it being down in Cook's Bay and in Lake Simcoe. So to me, that was something new. You know, it was normally in the lakes that didn't really have much movement in it.
The cyanobacteria, right? You're quite right. It is a new thing for Lake Simcoe, and in terms of prevention, great question. I think when you look at the factors, a lot of them are environmental. You know, nutrient input is the only one that we can tackle, and certainly phosphorus removal is a focus of the Conservation Authority and Lake Simcoe Protection Plan. So that's not changing. But the other factors are kind of outside of our control in terms of, you know, a wet spring and a hot summer and wind. Those are you know, obviously beyond our control. So what we're focusing on, aside from nutrient reduction, is trying to provide early line of sight. So what are the conditions that in the lake just before a bloom arises, so that we can give the Spills Action Center units and water operators, you know, an early warning to make preparations. There isn't really a kind of a wide scale treatment strategy that I've seen anywhere. It's really about trying to remove the conditions that cause it, and then as you know, belt and suspenders, trying to provide that early warning.
Well, I know when we had it back in 2013 or 14, I believe, in Lagoon City. I know that was before I was a counselor and before I got on the Parks and Waterways. And when I came on board, we were told that if we could get the water moving, we could stop the blue-green algae from happening. And so what we've found is when we put in our bubbler systems and we started the different water movement, we put in fountains and things like that, and that causes, I guess, the water to move. And we seem to have stopped it. Like we haven't, like that one year we had it, it was in every canal and you could almost taste it. It was in the air. It was pretty horrible. And since then, the only time we've actually come close to getting it again was one of our canals before we put the bubbler system in. You could see it starting, and then the wind picked up, and we got rain, and that sort of prevented it from happening. But that was about the closest we saw it coming. So it does work, I think, with the water movement and the bubblers and so on and so forth. But you can't really do that in Lake Simcoe, can you?
Right. Yeah. A little prohibitive in terms of its size and the volume of water we're talking about. And you know, there is pretty good movement in the lake. So yeah, I think the best we can do is to focus on those nutrient inputs and trying to provide early warning for the health units and water folks.
So the early warning is basically to warn people to stay out of the water. Really, there's not much you can do with it then, really.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's a precautionary thing. So stay out of the water, and then for water operators, they need to be aware of when it's so when there's a bloom reported to the Spills Action Center, water operations folks then have to sample regularly at the input to make sure that the supply is safe. So just arming them with information is
well, one last question, blue green edge, and then I want to talk about the disclosure rate. It was only down at Cook's Bay where you saw it. Was there blue green algae up in the north part of the lake?
There was. It was actually, we first noticed it up in Ormodonte. It was across the lake.
Oh, okay. I didn't. Okay, so it's all through the lake now then. Going to the social weed there, I remember, and this goes back when I was a counselor back many years ago, it showed up and it was in the Peterborough area. And it showed up down in Pefferlaw at that time, and they took it out really quickly, and they dealt with it and from what I understood, it's one of the most dangerous weeds we've ever seen coming into our lakes right now. And when they, from what I understand, is once they start to grow, they grow on top of one another. They clog up the area. The fish can't grow. Those the leaves are so sharp they cut you, and you try to take them out, or if you walk in them with the bare legs and so on and so forth. Is this really something? I think because Cook's Bay is designed like it's so shallow. I think it could be in a lot of trouble getting this weed in there. And one last thing, and then you can comment, is from what I understand, the herbicide that we use here actually does eliminate the soldier weed, correct?
There is a herbicide, and in addition to the Trent Severn, that the Bay of Quinte has experienced a water soldier outbreak, and it's being managed through herbicide application that seems to be controlling it. The challenge in Cook's Bay is the other water uses in that area with some agricultural taking. So herbicide and agriculture don't mix.
Oh, really? So there's, what are they trying to do? Are they trying to harvest it, or what are they doing?
Well, they're trying to see whether an off-season herbicide application and mechanical harvesting can contribute to tackle it, but the management plan is and mitigation plan is still under development.
Does it? We have an issue with it growing on our sand beaches, or does it have to have nourishment, like into more of a different type of lake bottom?
It usually likes a soft kind of mucky bottom.
Sort of like what we have inside our lagoons here. Yeah. Well, I do know we use the herbicide, so that's one thing I know that we're cross our fingers we won't get it. But I would have to imagine the rest of the town's going to have to worry at some of our shallow lakes throughout the lake, throughout the Ramara, because once that gets in, it'll be murder to get it out. That was the only comment I had. I know when I went for the seminar back 10, 15 years ago, people were really scared of it, the way they were talking about it. It sounded like a horrible weed. It was worse than this, the one we're battling right now. I think you had a question, Councillor Bell?
Yeah, thank you. Don, it is just curious. So up until now, the only herbicide that we were able to use is reward or dicot. And so you're speaking of a herbicide application in Bay of Quinte, and I'm wondering, is it that, or is Minister allowing a different kind of herbicide for this particular outbreak?
I would have to look into the details there, Councillor Bell, but it is a commercially available herbicide that they're using there. So I'll get the details for you.
Just, I was curious on that one, and just one other thing, and I know you know this, Cal, but just for clarity at home, I don't like using the word bubbler system, as you know, because I don't want to confuse people with what it does. So I'm going to just repoint that, I have to. So just for clarity, the primary role that the clean flow system plays is muck reduction or natural dredging versus conventional dredging. And when Cal is speaking of agitation, it's just a byproduct. So it's the agitation along the surface of the water, which ultimately breaks the sun's rays, which limits the nutrients or the plants that are growing at the floors of the waterways. So I always have to correct us, because it's only for education. So sorry, Cal, but it's taken us 3 years to help people understand difference between clean flow system and water movers. So I just want to, and I know but I just want to repoint it, so for anybody listening, we don't lose the message. That's all.
Right, but just so you know, the clean flow system, part of it was put in because we wanted that agitation of the water moving through to move it for the whatchamacallit, that algae, the blue-green algae. That was part of the reason we did put it in. So yeah, it actually does a lot of stuff. The whole thing, it does so many different things, so they all work together. And that's what I've always said in our lagoons. Everything we do works together, right from that to harvesting, everything. It all ties together. Everything works together. Fountains, everything. Water mover, everything works together.
For sure that, and that's the other thing too, I would say is the presentation that Nick DeMarco gave us from Weeds Be Gone, I think it was the one 2 years back, is still available. And we do have the Q&A for that available. And Nick does a good job of talking about the various strategies that we use working together. So if anybody wants to have that Q&A, just let me know and I can send it off to you.
Yeah, well, you have Nick coming. Sorry, Don, we're going up, but you have Nick coming again, because he always does a good one. Yeah, okay, no problem. Does anybody have any more questions for Don? Well, Don, you have no more questions, but thank you very much. It's always interesting listening to you, and you always come up with something a little different here with that blue-green algae and the soldier weed, which I'm sure we're going to hear about that soldier weed a lot when you come and talk to us, and it'd be really interesting how we're dealing with it in our lakes and where it's showing up, because it looks like it's going to start to spread now, right?
Yeah, it's definitely top of the list for us. Yeah. So,
well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, so let's move to the next thing. Sorry. I'm going to just read the recommendation. The recommendation is that waterside wisdom presentation from the LSRCA with respect to Lake Simcoe health update we received for information. So we've already got on the floor. All in favor? That's passed. It's already been put on the floor. I just wanted to reread it. We're going to 7.1, accounts voucher dated September 6, 2024. Recommendations that the accounts vouchers dated December 6, 2024 be received as information. Put it on the floor. Councillor Bell, second by Commissioner Mason. Any discussion on that? I see Commissioner Shoesmith's hands up.
Well, just a point, I think it was Sugarbush that did the tree removal on the beaches. They just did a fabulous job. The comments have been so positive on the work that was performed here. So I just wanted to point that out. They took the stumps right down to ground level, and you can't even tell that they'd been there. It was just a fabulous job. I'm just referring to one of the bills here, the Sugarbush.
$33,965.
Yeah, it was a lot of money, but yeah, that included both beaches and a number of other items. But they just did a fabulous job. Just so much more different than any previous contractors we've had out there. I don't know. We've always used the same, or they just changed their method of tree removal. But just a great job.
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to ask that question, how that went, because I saw the price for it. My only follow-up on it was, and I can't remember, have we budgeted trees to be put in to replace some of these?
I believe we have budgeted for that, or at least it was in part of the plan. I'm not sure if we spent the budget now with this amount. I think we had factored in about $5,000 per tree for tree removal, if I'm correct. I'm not sure, and $10,000 in total for tree removal and tree replacement per unit that's been removed. So I don't know what the total budget was. I think it was around 60,000, but this is just right off the top of my head. I can't recall exactly.
Councilor Bell?
Yeah, that's the thing I was going to speak to. I was going to do it under budget to actuals, but that invoice is for about 33,000, and we had 45,000 in the budget for trees. So and when we do have tree planting coming, which I'm sure infrastructure was planning to speak to anyway, but I guess Josh can let us know where we're at with that, the remaining $12,000.
Josh?
Yeah, so essentially that money is only allotted for this year's budget. So we have 2 weeks if you want trees to get them and plant them and put them in. It's not in the budget for 2025. Essentially, the money that's left over goes into reserves. It's not carried forward unless it's in the 2025 budget.
So do we have money in there for trees next year in the 2025 budget?
I don't believe we did budget for trees for 2025, but I'm not sure if anybody did pay attention to the Monday council meeting. We do have LSRCA, Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority, on the north private beach. We do have a tree planting program They're not going to be large trees, they're going to be saplings. But we do have a planting plan for that North Beach to try to reforest it over the next few years. So
They were going to be maples, correct?
it's a variety of many different trees.
Okay.
So it is all in the actual tree planting plan is on the council agenda for Monday. So if anybody's interested, they can go to that agenda and they can pull that tree planting plan for that area.
Mhm.
So in this tree planting, there's plans to water them and look after them once they're planted?
Yeah, so there is some requirements on the township to do some maintenance with them. They are saplings, so at early stages they'll require some water, but not a lot of water. But yeah, there is plans in place for all that. So
And why didn't we get it on the South Beach? Why is it only on the North Beach?
because we looked at all those areas, and on the South Beach, it is still fairly heavily forested, where the North Beach is essentially gone fairly barren. So it was trying to look at all those factors and to see if the trees would actually survive in those areas. So the focus was more on the North Beach. We can look again in future years if the program still is available to us to plant other areas as well. So,
All right. I think Commissioner Shoesmith has a question, then Councillor Bell.
Yeah, actually, is there not a plan in place to remove still? There's a couple of willows that aren't quite at the end of their life cycle, but probably will be shortly. Was there no plan this year to actually remove those also?
no, we were not removing trees that were still alive. We did trim those trees.
Right.
On the tree mortality with the ash borer. Anything that is alive, we are trying to retain.
Okay.
We're only maintaining, trimming trees that are alive and only taking down trees that essentially are dead.
Fine. Okay.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you. I just was going to say a couple of things. First, we've gone way off account voucher. Like this should be a conversation for later. But also, since we've already gone that far, I did want to just sort of say we also went into council territory versus Parks and Waterways territory on the LSRCA project. So I just for your information, Greg, I will be reaching out to the people via council over on Paradise just to make sure that you have seen the tree planting plan, and it's going to require volunteers. So there's actually going to be more outreach. It's just going to come through the council perspective, not Parks and Waterways. So,
But it's nice for Parks and Waterways to be aware of that because it is the beaches, right?
Yeah.
And also too, I guess now, and we'll bring it up later then if you want on that $12,000, whether or not we spend it on trees, like new trees, right? Right, whether or not we do need them or whether or not we just let it go back into our reserves. So that'll be something we can talk about in new business. There was something else I was going to ask about that, and I forgot now. The hydro. So I was just like wondering, I don't know, on this hydro, the bill, right? I guess my question is, you have certain plans where you get cheaper hydro when you use it and so on and so forth. Are we on any of those plans with our pump systems?
Yep, yeah, we are, but because the clean flow system operates 24/7, it's tiered usage essentially.
And that's what we're on that plan.
That's what we're on, correct? Yeah. So the only one we really looked at in the past essentially was the water movers, to operate them in the low charge period, that overnight period. But that's when we ran into the issues of noise mitigation and running them at certain times, not reflecting time of use pricing. But those clean flow systems are operational 24/7. So you'd have the 3 tiers for timing.
So there's not much you can do with that. Okay, that's
Yeah.
my other question. Any more discussion on 7.1? All in favor? I'll be passed. 7.2, budget to actual report. The recommendation that the budget to actual report dated 2024 be received as information. Somebody put on the floor, please. Commissioner Bell, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Any discussion on 7.2? No, everything looked good to me on that, other than that, the budget at the beginning, we already talked about that. Yep. Is your hand up, Councillor Bell? No. All in favor? That's passed. Items of information. Infrastructure, the recommendation that we received, infrastructure and public works update is information. Somebody put on the floor, Councillor Bell, second by Commissioner Mason. I believe, Chris, are you speaking to this? Or Josh?
Yeah, no, good morning, everybody. Sorry, I was muted there. So just a couple of quick items this year, wrapping up the waterways. Weeds Begun was in on the 13th of November and applied their final treatment to the entire canal system. They were in and out in a day, so if anybody saw them in there, that's what was happening that day. And the clean flow system was shut down on the 2nd of December. So it's shut down now for the winter. Should anybody, for whatever reason, see them fire back up through the winter, please report it right away to us here in the township, and we will we'll get it rectified right away. So, and that's all I've got currently right now. I'm not sure Josh may have a thing or two there. So.
Yeah, so just two quick updates. So update one, the North Footbridge, it is all completed. All the equipment's been removed. The bridge is open to residents. We are maintaining that bridge for the winter like we have in the past. So the total project came in just over $650,000, which is still under the budget that we had originally passed over the contract amount, but that was due to some unforeseen circumstances. So I do still have holdbacks, the statutory holdbacks, 10% to 2.5% that will have to be paid. And there is the construction administration EXP's fees for being out there, which will also have to be paid. That's on top of the 653. So all in all, we're still going to be under what we had passed, but over what we had budgeted, but over what we had passed. So the second update, so we were planning on doing dredging. We have about a week's worth of dredging that was left to complete from 2023. We were all set up and ready to go, and the canals froze over on us. So rather than trying to fight the weather, which I'm kind of glad we made that decision, we pulled everything out, and the plan right now is to go in the spring. There's about 400 cubic meters of dredging to be completed, which is only about a week's worth of work. So the impact is essentially going to be minimal in the spring to any residents. And it is on Gondola Canal, essentially from the footbridge east towards Old Indian Trail, the bridge there. And what we were going to be dredging essentially is a 10-foot channel through the center of the canal to allow those large boats to go through. So it's been put on hold, unfortunately, again, but it will be completed this spring as soon as everything allows. So,
okay. I have one question for you, Josh. The height of the bridge, is it the same height as when we started, or is it a bit higher?
Yeah, so it did settle a bit during construction, but we re-tightened and brought everything up to pre-existing levels, so it hasn't changed.
Okay, because I know those questions will come later.
Yeah.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thanks to Josh and the infrastructure team. I happen to be across from the bridge, so I can always see when the guys are here. Sometimes I throw chocolate bars in their truck if I see them in time. But I noticed that actually the truck, and I haven't necessarily seen this in the past, but I saw they were able to like go right down toward the bridge and scrape back. So the pathway was like really cleaned well. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? No. Thank you, guys. All in favor? That's passed. Unfinished or new business. The 8-ton evacuator. Recommendations that the verbal report regarding the proposed allocation of 92.5 for half the cost of the purchase of an 8-ton backwater to be shared between the Township of Ramara and Lagoon City Parks and Waterways Commission be received this information, and that whatever I guess we decide we put in there. Let's put that on the floor. That'll be Councillor Bell, second by Commissioner Shoesmith. I guess the discussion on this is the town, I guess, doesn't want to go in halves on it, right? So my question, I guess, and I guess Josh is just going to have to be here for a bit longer on this. There's been discussion on this for probably 6 years, right? Like the other commissioners really wanted it. Some of them really wanted it. Some didn't want it. We went back and forth. And are we reaching a point where we should be seriously looking? We have 95 that are 95 or 92,000 in the budget. Should we be seriously looking at something like this, or putting that aside, doing it next year? Like I don't know. I didn't go back over all the costs and all the different analyzing that was done on it, right? But
Yeah.
if your suggestion was to do that, and I understand council's not interested, and I kind of wondered if it was going to be fair either way. I didn't really look into it much, but are they not going to need to get some piece of equipment? If you were looking at them getting one and us, we needed one, are they eventually going to have to get a piece of equipment?
So it kind of all depends what way the township essentially focuses. So do I need an 8-ton excavator? No. But at times, yes. Within the infrastructure, we have a 15-ton currently that we do ditch maintenance, drain maintenance, all that kind of stuff with. A smaller machine would avail us to get into some of the smaller work, so swales or stuff like that, where there is issues, or some of the smaller outlets through private property that we own and maintain, essentially. Where currently I'll bring in a contractor or I'll rent a machine for that. So it was trying to essentially have some sort of balance with the machine that we could utilize within infrastructure as well within the commission. The issue I face when you guys need the machine is essentially the same point in time when I need the machine. So to mitigate that, we do have a backhoe that we could swap out. But essentially, the reason it was cut from the budget, we had to make some pretty significant cuts within the infrastructure budget this year to try to balance everything out to get to the point for a tax increase that was appeasable by everybody. So that machine from an infrastructure side is on the wish list. It's not a required piece of equipment. It's something that would benefit us. Right now, I have it budgeted in for either a contractor to come in or we rent the machine to do the work. When we look at essentially parks and we start setting some standards within our parks, a machine like that could be utilized within a parks department, I believe, quite easily to do some upgrades, maintenance, stuff like that within our park system. As far as the commission requiring a machine, it essentially is only that July till October. Right now, we are renting a backhoe or mini excavator. On average, I believe it's about $4,000 a month. So it's looking at economy of scale. If we had done it 10 years ago, it probably would have been close to being paid off at this point. It's just trying, but at the same point, with renting a machine, we're not paying for maintenance. If something goes wrong, we just make the phone call and we get a new machine, or they come and fix it right away. If that machine were to be owed, there's maintenance and all that kind of other stuff that comes with it. The infrastructure doesn't need a backhoe. We already have one. So essentially the only way I could make it work was to go with an excavator. Is it something we can look at in the future? 100%. So the money we could, with the 92.5, look at used equipment, but you're always kind of gambling with used equipment. A new machine is just over $180,000. We did half and half. You could get a good used machine for 92.5, but there's no guarantees of it being a good machine. We can do our due diligence and look it over and have mechanics look it over, or dealer look it over, but you kind of never really know what you're getting into. Sometimes you have no issues at all, and it's a great machine. Other times it's that lemon. Um, so in my opinion, I think if the commission is really set on getting a piece of equipment, put the 92.5 in reserves and budget the balance for it next year, and 2026 we can look at a machine, so long that I can't get it through infrastructure anyways. I think that's kind of my 2 cents on it. I don't know if that helps everybody or kind of just colludes it
I
even
guess the
further.
question would be then is really then we probably wouldn't rent it back to the town. It wouldn't work because when they would want to rent it from us, we needed it ourselves, right? So that wouldn't work, right?
Yeah, it's kind of the way we did the pickup truck. Like the commission bought the pickup truck. I do all the maintenance and everything to it. So in my opinion, it'd be something along the same deal. Essentially, would I be charging you guys for storage of it the months that you guys don't use it, or do you need a facility now to put it in or somewhere to put it? So it's kind of one hand feeds the other. Yeah.
Yeah. All right then, because I do know before I know Deputy Deputy Mayor wants to say that. I know before with the commission, there's 5 of us, and there was always 3 that said no, and 2 wanted to buy it, and that's how I guess it had gone over the period. And it was always talked about, but we never actually did it. So, anyways, what do you have to say, Deputy Mayor?
I would just concur with what Josh was saying. I mean, I deal with equipment every day, and I just don't see the amount of use you'd have to get out of a piece that's that expensive. I just can't see it being used. The actual, it wouldn't last long enough to get your payback. It's going to be cheaper to just rent for the short periods we need it each year.
So you're on that side of the 3 than on the commission before you. Any more discussion on that? No. So what are we going to do? Are we going to put it back into reserves and talk about it again next year? I see a lot of nods. Councillor Bell, you say something?
Yeah, thank you. I was waiting to see what Greg or William thought, but I think that we should receive the recommendation that we transfer the money back to reserves at the moment. I wouldn't say that it wouldn't have been worth it to purchase, but I think what Josh said is bang on. If we'd been in a position years ago to make the purchase, it would be, yeah, we would be at the point where it had paid for itself now, potentially, but we didn't. So I think for now, the best move to make is to transfer that money back to reserves and just sort of reconsider this as we move forward.
Yeah, but by saying that, you could say that right now, if you did it 10 years from now, it would pay for it, right? right? That sort of thinking, right? But to me, I have no problems. I agree, put it back in reserves. That's my feeling too. And I see everybody nodding.
Yeah.
So, and that we will return funds to reserve. So,
and the other thing, Cal, I was going to say is you're right. The same argument is true. We could be in the same position in 10 years, but knowing that there's changes, as Josh mentioned, with, the potential for a parks department at the township, it could potentially change this conversation in a year or two. So I completely agree that, yeah, and that we transfer the 92,005 back to reserves.
Well, one of the other things too that could change this totally is you could change the way that we take the weeds, and we could have a compressor that brings the weeds together and crunch it up more so they go a different way and squeeze the water in. Because I know I used to have a baler in my company, and we baled paper, and we put out tons and tons of it. So if you could bale that, then you wouldn't need something to push down on it. But it's all things for the future that we need to look at. So I forget who put this on the floor and seconded it. Whoever it was, or I guess everybody's okay to put it in reserves. Okay. Okay. So did you get that, Deputy Clerk?
Yes, I did. So it was put on the table by Councillor Bell, seconded by Commissioner Sue Smith. And the first part of the resolution is that the verbal report would be received for information, and that the 2025 budgeted amount for the 8-ton excavator in the amount of $92,500 be transferred into reserves.
Yeah, that's perfect. You guys okay with that? Okay, all in favor? Okay, that's passed. We're going to go into a closed session. I just wanted to go in just to say
Hang
a
on,
few words.
Cal. We didn't do unfinished. And
Sorry,
and
I
now,
always forget that. Darn it.
that's okay. I just was going to say, because now we have the $12,000 remaining from the $45,000 from the tree budget. And I think we should talk about, so, and I understand, Josh, what you're saying is we need to spend it this year because it was a 24 budgeted item. So I guess that's where we are. Do we want to return the 12,000 to reserves as well? Or do we want to, yeah, I mean, I guess we're at the end of the year, we kind of have to return it to reserves, but I guess what I'd want to say is to leave it out there that we may want to do a request to remove it back out of reserves in the spring if it, or yeah, because it may turn out that we could reapply that to trees or to some of our beautification projects, for example, and expedite putting in our hedges around some of our clean flow houses, let's say. So I think we should just formally discuss it. And if it's going back to reserves, we should say so.
Well, we can discuss it right now if we want to. And if we want to take more money, you put 92.5 back in on this equipment, right? To utilize it there. And all you have to do is just say that you're changing it and put it back to council, get an okay from them, and away you go. If you want to put in, say, 10 or 15, $20,000 worth of trees, but it sounds like you're putting the trees on the north side where they need to be done already. And I haven't seen that report or heard it, but it sounds really good. So I'm not too sure. You might be wanting to look at the hedges with this money. So it's something we should probably follow up maybe in the next Parks and Waterways meeting.
Yeah, so at the moment, do we just agree to transfer it back to reserves and then we can revisit pulling it out for in the spring or yeah, at the next commission meeting? But I think we have to deal with it, right? Because now it's leftover money from 2024. So we have to determine.
We just put it back in reserves, know that we have that money we put there, and take a look in our next meeting and maybe just make sure that we don't have something that's going to blow up in our face where we need money, because we kind of have that sitting there now, right?
Okay, so then I'll put the motion on the floor that we return the balance of the 45,000 allocated for 2024 tree planting to reserves. So I just need a second.
There's $45,000 for tree planting?
That's what we had budgeted, and for 24 we had $45,000 in, and we spent the 33,000 that's in that invoice. So we've got about $12,000.
Okay, I understand what you're saying now. Okay,
yeah. So I'll put the motion on the floor that we return the balance of the $45,000 that was allocated for tree planting to reserves.
Right, and let's talk about the hedges, and let's talk about the next meeting then, where we can get some information, and I guess ask deputy clerk to get more information on it for us, right?
Well, I think that Chris has the plan that we started to build. The beautification plan exists anyway, so I think it would just be a question of maybe Chris looking at if we were going to reapply that 12,000. What's his recommendation?
Chris?
I was going to actually put it on the agenda for January to have a discussion about beautification anyway, so it'll all go hand in hand to have an open discussion as to what 2025 is going to look like moving forward with the beautification plan. So, and hopefully some people have some other ideas to add to that list at this point in time. I might have one or two to add at that point. So I was going to put it on the agenda for the January meeting.
Okay, so Deputy Clerk, should we put that back into our reserves and leave it and then decide what to do it in January, February, or do we just leave it hanging?
I believe that naturally, if there's anything left from the budget, it goes into reserves. If you want to correct me on that, Josh, but so sorry, do you want to?
Yeah, no, you're 100% correct. Anything that is a surplus left over at the end of the year will automatically transfer into reserves.
So can I go back to that though? But if we're still in the midst now of getting trees and doing this beautification, which is part of what we were doing, we just didn't spend it all, would that not just hang out there and be used in the new year? Or would it just,
No, to use it in the new year, you have to re-budget that amount. So like any capital projects I have, if we get midway through the year and I know it's not going to be completed in the year, I re-budget the balance of what was allotted for that project into the next year, so into 2025.
okay, question answered. That's what we need to do. Okay. So let's put that in and we'll talk about it in January then. Do I put a motion forward on that, Deputy Clerk?
We don't have to because it just automatically goes into reserve, so we don't need to.
Perfect. Okay.
I guess the only reason I was saying that was because we then had a whole discussion about it. So then I didn't know what we wanted to do, because now we've just got this discussion hanging out there that has it's not attached to anything, right? So I mean, I guess that's fine. We just automatically transfer it, but we had a whole discussion about what are we going to do with the $12,000. So I guess we can just leave it as prattling on discussion and automatically let it transfer. I don't know.
Yeah, you could do that, and then if you choose to draw from that, you just do essentially a reserve draw next year, a real allocation. So,
And I guess what Chris in January can give us the beautification because of those trees and what's being planted on the North Beach that's been decided and which council's looking after. So we'll hear all that in January then. Perfect. Okay. Is there anything else that unfinished or new business? Councillor Bell, I see.
Thank you. Yeah, one thing, and I nearly did forget. So this is actually for Josh, and no, it's not relevant today, but it will be relevant as we look at projects in the spring. So the resurfacing of the footbridge pathways, the South Footbridge pathway has already got quite a bit of, like the surface is already breaking down. And I've been meaning to say that to you for 2 months so that you could go over and have a look at it. So now you've got snow. So I'm just bringing
no,
it.
it's been redone. So we did
Okay.
repave about a month ago. So
oh, good. Okay.
I did a secondary overlay on top of it. There was some deficiencies with it. So there's a secondary overlay that was put on top of the original one. With the work, there was a few soft spots within it. And rather than taking out the asphalt that was breaking up, we figured it would be better to put a secondary layer over top to try to get more rigidity with it. So it is completed. It's done. So.
Oh, perfect. I kept meaning to, I've been trying to ask you and it just keeps slipping my mind. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and the other thing, that light, I know it was meant to be brought up today for the South Footbridge as well. I did email the contractor yesterday to see if they had any updates. They're waiting from their supplier for updates on some new lighting. So we had the contractor go out to look at the lighting. Their concern essentially was if we change the lighting pattern, we could be open to possible liability because the bridge is no longer being lit up across the whole span. So one of the recommendations was to do downward facing lighting on either side of the bridge and then have essentially string lights or rope lights that go all the way across the span of the bridge underneath the railing. So I'm just waiting on some pricing. Once we have that pricing, I'll bring it to Chris, and then Chris can bring it to a future meeting. And then you guys can determine if you want to move forward with the expense to put in this new lighting or stick with the current lighting on that bridge. So.
Okay. Councillor Bell.
Thank you. And I guess it's obvious, but I'll just say it so that people hear us say it. You would, when this pricing comes back, it will be for both bridges, obviously, right? Because we would treat the two the same.
I wasn't planning that, but I can.
So I think because the North Footbridge has actually been a bone of contention for a different reason, though, where it's impassable because it's so dark. So it would be, if this solution is going to do proper lighting on the south and, I think it would be worth looking at it for both bridges, at least knowing what the price would be for both bridges, right? If they haven't done the quote yet anyway, we may as well know, because we've had I have had quite a lot of complaints about this bridge, and people are afraid to cross it at night, and it really is very, very dark. So it would probably make sense to just get the both quotes together. Yeah, and then I know that our next meeting is not till January, but as you know, there's a few residents quite concerned at the South Footbridge. So if the quote comes in, or if there's any update that you can provide to those residents between now and the next meeting, that would be appreciated as well. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, well, we'll inspect that north bridge because it has the same lighting currently as the south bridge. I didn't realize there's issues there. So if they're not working, we can get them on. So,
That
okay,
was the same question I had. Was the lights the same on the North Beach? So on the North Bridge, because the North Bridge, apparently there's complaints it's not bright enough, and on the South Bridge, it's too bright.
yeah, they're the exact same on both. So,
Well, Cal, I think the question at the North Bridge too is that there's no ability for natural light to filter through there, with just there's a lot of like overgrowth of trees and things like that, and also no people at the North Bridge typically. So there's no other like lighting coming from, you know, adjacent homes or anything like that to help light it up most of the time. So it's and yeah, the pathways themselves are quite dark. Well, we can't fix that necessarily, but the bridge itself, it is a little bit treacherous to cross, I will say. So yeah, I would like to see the you know, just to know what we're looking at.
okay, so is there an intent or a request to get lighting up the pathway as well then, or just on the bridge?
It sure sounds like if you're just putting lights along the railing, then that's not going to help the North Bridge at all.
And no, it's
No.
not going to help with the pathways up to the bridge.
It's not going to help with the pathways, I agree, but the actual crossing of the bridge it's very dark when you're
Okay.
when you're crossing over there. So I think that it would be worth looking at the treatments. And then yeah, I mean, the thing with the pathways is tree trimming, which we've talked about quite a few times now, but the trees are originating on private property. So all we could do is trim kind of the overhanging onto the pathway. And it is on both approaches, right? There's overgrowth on both
So can I
sides.
get this
So
straight then? You're saying that the light isn't bright enough on the bridge, on the North Beach.
right,
On the
because
North
what
Bridge.
happened, right, because the bridges are dark. There's no light anywhere over on that channel. So therefore it's quite dark trying to cross the bridge. And that but it's two things, right? The approaches are very,
Yeah, I
very
understand the approaches would
and
be
then
dark,
the
but the bridge itself.
itself, yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. I think that if we were able to bring in better lighting that makes the bridge more passable, I would want to look at doing it on both bridges. So I understand the specific concern at the South Bridge is that the kind of light we're using, it's not buffering away from houses, but the kind of light we're using also doesn't light the crossing of the entire bridge, whereas these lights along the railings would then light the bridge from one side to the other for safe passage. And it is very dark crossing this bridge. So on this bridge, it's two different things.
Yeah, you're making me want to go down and look at the North Bridge now. I haven't been down there for a while, but now it's not a good time with the white snow, so I'll have to wait. Okay. So yeah, we just leave that then. There's nothing to put on the floor then. It was just discussion. Does anybody else have anything else in new business or unfinished business? No, we're done. I want to go into closed session then, if that's all right, to talk about the minutes from the special Lagoon City Parks and Waterways meeting held on November 21st. And we'll go into the closed session at what time is it now? Come on, 11:07. Trying. I always forget to go to the gallery when we come out because all I see is myself.
Hmm.
Okay, so I had to get a mover and second to go into closed session. So I'll get a mover, Commissioner Mason, second by Councillor Bell. We came out of that 11:12, and I guess what we need to do is the minutes of the special. I got to put that on the floor now, right?
Oh, sorry.
No,
Cal,
mover
can
and
we?
seconder for coming out. Right.
Yes,
Oh,
thank you.
okay. All right, and a mover and second for coming out. I've got Councillor Bell, second by Commissioner Shoesmith. All in favor? That's passed. So 10.1 minutes of the special Lagoon City Parks and Waterways meeting held on November 21st, 2024. I guess put it on the floor. That would be Deputy Mayor, second by Commissioner Shoesmith. All in favor? That's passed. And our adjournment, I believe, is at 11:13. Okay, everybody have a great day. We've
Oh,
adjourned.
sorry, Cal, can we have a mover and seconder for that too?
Wow, I'm in such a hurry to get going here. The mover will be Commissioner Mason, and the second will be Councillor Bell.
Great, thank you.
All right, have a good one, guys. And
All right,
take care.
happy holidays,
I don't
everyone.
think the snow started yet. You have fun down in Mexico, eh?
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thanks.
All right, have a good holidays.
Take
I
care.
was going to
Bye-bye.
joke and say to Don Goodyear to have a